2. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Hey, Kenny. Oh, no, now I'm on. Now I'm on. Yep.
Wow, that was the first. You had to come get me. We're still pouring in here. I'll give you 30 seconds. 16. Appreciate it.
There's some water over here too. You want
Thank you. Yeah, let me get that preset. What's going on there?
It's cold. These are live. A funny story having nothing to do with it. Just a nice.
All right, ready to go?
Yeah. We begin our service this evening on page 10. Words of welcome. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
How wonderful it is when we all gather together in prayer and community. Shabbat Shalom. I am Brian Immerman. This is Kenny Lyonswright. Welcome to those who are here in our sanctuary and those who are joining us online. As we settle into prayer, take a moment to turn to those near you, in front of you, behind you. If you see somebody sitting by themselves, please walk up and greet them. Wish each other a Shabbat Shalom and introduce yourselves if you don't know each other.
Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
We turn to page 2 as we light our Shabbat candles.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
As you would know if you're coming every single week, but you might not know if you're only coming once in a while. This is our throwback Shabbat. So we are throwing it back to some tunes that we haven't done in a while, maybe some tunes you grew up with, and that can be regardless of your age, because we're going back 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 80, hears really melodies that were really common throughout the Reform movement that we just haven't done in a long time. So we turn it to page 24. We welcome the Sabbath angels with Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Etchem LeShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
At the bottom of page 25, and so we understand that ordinary people are messengers of the Most High. They go about their tasks in holy anonymity, often even unknown to themselves. And yet, if they had not been there, if they had not said what they said or did what they did, it would not be the way it is now. We would not be the way we are now. Never forget that you too, yourself, might be a messenger, perhaps even one whose errand extends over several lifetimes. We welcome the Sabbath presence into our midst on page 20 with Lecha Dodi. We pray together verses 1, 2, 5, and 9.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor vezachor binibur echad, yishmi'anu el hamayuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad, leshem ultiferet velitchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekol haberacha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, kiva orech umi ori, shir daveri, k'vod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela, Moi v'shalom ateret bala, Gam besimcha uvtzola, Toch emunei am segula, Moi chala, Moi chala, Lecha dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Page 33. The top of the page, we pray together. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Chanting together on page 36. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha ubechol nafshecha ubechol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'aderech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beineinecha uchtavtam al mizuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et mitzvotai, v'item kedoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem lelohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
To invite Missy to share a Michamocha Passover reflection with us.
Micha Mocha is our song celebrating our freedom, and we have been singing it and celebrating for 27 Shabbats. Tonight makes 28, 13 sessions of family school, 22 sessions of Hebrew school, for 196 days since October 7th. And in just a few days, we are supposed to celebrate Passover, celebrating our freedom from slavery for an entire week. How can we celebrate and keep celebrating when 133 of our people are still not free? Our Jewish tradition has a lot to teach us about this. The Talmud tells us that when a wedding procession meets a funeral procession in the town square, the funeral procession should pause and the wedding procession should go first. That joy takes precedence over sadness. But that's not always the case. When we recount the Exodus from Egypt, amidst the joy of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea safely, God rebukes the angels for celebrating, because many of the Egyptians drown when the Red Sea goes back to normal. While we very much hope that Hamas will be beaten as Pharaoh was, we also feel great sadness for the innocents in Gaza who have been hurt by this war. And the Jewish story that has helped me the most in this moment is a parable from an 18th century rabbi, Rabbi Simcha Bunim from Poland, who taught, everyone must have 2 pockets, with a note in each pocket, so that he or she can reach into one or the other depending on the need. When feeling lowly and depressed, one should reach into their right pocket and find the words, "For my sake was the world created." But when feeling high and mighty, one should reach into the left pocket and find the words, "I am but dust and ashes." All of us can hold opposing feelings and ideas, experiencing each when we need them. During my recent experiences in Israel, I was most struck by the way Israelis are carrying trauma and grief in one pocket and joy and hope in the other. I saw this when I met Donnie, a survivor from the attack on Kibbutz Nahal Oz. Donnie and his wife spent 19 hours in their safe room on October 7th, from 6:29 in the morning until they were rescued by the IDF at 1:30 the next morning, instead of celebrating the kibbutz's 70th anniversary as they had planned to do that day. Going into the safe room at first was not a big deal, a typical occurrence for the kibbutzim in the Gaza envelope, with rockets being shot toward them regularly. But when Donnie's wife stepped out of the safe room to use the bathroom and heard trucks passing by with people speaking in Arabic, they knew that this time was different. From that moment on, they spent hours and hours in fear, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing if their family members on the kibbutz were safe. When they were finally freed at 1:30 in the morning, they discovered that their children and grandchildren were okay, but 15 members of their kibbutz were killed and 8 were taken hostage. 5 have since been returned as part of the hostage release in November. 1 was killed in captivity and 2 remain as hostages. Most of the people of Nahal Oz are still displaced and unable to return home. And despite all of this, Donnie finished his talk with us by saying, "All my life, I tried to make the world a little better. Now, we need to make it much better." His belief in a better world, despite what he had been through, is inspiring. I next met Lee Siegel, the brother of Keith Siegel, an American citizen who is still being held hostage. Despite the fear and grief, Lee was still able to make jokes about how when Keith comes home, he's going to hate the picture that was chosen for him on the hostage poster, that it's a silly picture and he has much better pictures. Lee's sister-in-law, Aviva, was also taken hostage and was released at the end of November. They learned that Keith and Aviva were moved 13 times in the 51 days that Aviva was held hostage. When she learned she was going to be released, she refused to leave without Keith. She was told he's on the list for the next day, so she went, but he is still being held hostage 145 days later. When I returned to Israel a couple of weeks ago, I was able to hear from Aviva directly. She was one of the speakers at the regular Saturday night rally in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. And this may be where we see hope and resilience the most. Despite the grief that Israelis are carrying every single day, they will not set down the hope they are also carrying that their friends will come home. We also see this in Rachel Goldberg, the mother of American hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland. She was just named one of Time's 100 most influential people of the year for her tireless efforts and hope to bring Hirsch home. And finally, you see both grief and joy that each Israeli carries just by walking through the streets of Israel. As I walked through Tel Aviv, I was struck by the change in Dizengoff Square. There is a fountain where people used to sit and chat and drink coffee all day long. Today, there is no room to sit because the fountain is covered in monuments to the hostages and to those who have been killed. And then you keep walking, and 5 minutes later, you're on the beach. People are enjoying life and smiling and laughing, playing volleyball, windsurfing, Israeli dancing. And this is what life in Israel looks like right now. Everyone is carrying grief and trauma, and then 5 minutes later, they are carrying joy and hope. And so too, this Passover, we can carry both. We can experience the joy and redemption of our celebration of freedom from the narrowness of Mitzrayim, Egypt. And we can also feel grief and sadness for the hostages who are not yet free, still enslaved in the narrowness of the Gaza tunnels. Our Seder is full of symbols reminding us of our journey to freedom. And I encourage you to add one more symbol to your Seder table this year. Yellow ribbons and flowers have become a symbol for the hostages, so consider adorning your table with a bouquet of yellow flowers. And when we say next year in Jerusalem, say it with hope that it may be true for our brothers and sisters still in captivity. Shabbat Shalom.
Page 40. And with that charge for freedom ringing in our ears, we offer our song of freedom, the song that the Israelites sang after they finished crossing the Red Sea, the words of Mi Chamocha. Mi Chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Nor tehilot osefele, Nor tehilot osefele, Adonai imloch, Adonai imloch, leolam vaed. Yai, lai, 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 lai.
As we walk forward carrying our own grief and hope, we pray that God shelters us in a Sukkot Shalom, this dwelling place of peace, where we are supported by friends and family and visitors from now and in ages past to come to visit us, to help bring us a little sense of joy, a little sense of comfort, and a lot of hope. Page 42.
Our synagogue is almost 30 years old, and that makes this tune a throwback. Baruch atah, atah Adonai, haborei Sukkot Shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch atah, atah Adonai, haborei Sukkot Shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim Shalom. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim Shalom. אתה אדוני הבורא סוכת שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל.
Page 44.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
One of my favorite readings in our prayer book on page 47 teaches us a little bit about the essence of prayer. And in the Amidah prayer, it's a time when normally during the week there's many more blessings and we ask God for things. We ask God for sustenance, for shelter, for peace. We ask God for health and a myriad of other kind of basic needs, but eventually getting to restoring the throne in Jerusalem. But on Shabbat, we cut out most of the petitionary prayers. We still keep a prayer of peace. But when we ask God for things, in Judaism, that doesn't mean that we sit back and ask God to do things and then we sit down and we just sit there and wait and wait and wait. Rather, we partner with God to make things happen. So this reading on page 47 as we enter into our tefillah prayers teaches us that prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and rebuild a weakened will. We rise in body or spirit for tefillah beginning on page 46.
Adonai, sefatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 48. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el hagadol hagimor ve'hanora, El Elyon gomel chasadim tovim, ve'koneh ha'akol, ve'zocher chazdei avot v'imachot, u'mevii geula livnei v'nehem, leman shemo be'ahava, melech ozer u'moshia u'magin. Baruch atah Adonai, magin Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Page 50. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechayeh hakol atah rav lehoshia, mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechayeh hakol berachamim rabim, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. Page 52. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated. We turn to page 253 for our prayer of healing, for those in need of healing of mind, of body, and of spirit. I invite you to share the name of anybody who you are praying for healing, and if you are feeling a little bit broken, whether it's because of the war, whether it's because of something happening in your own lives, whether you're distraught about the planet, I invite you to hold yourself as well in this prayer for healing.
Of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say,
Take a moment for our own silent prayers.
Page 62. And a tune I know many of us associate very deeply with sitting in sanctuaries all around the country and all around the world. We join together in Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Throughout my life, I've spent Passover in a variety of places. When I was growing up, it was around my grandparents' table in their house, which was the same house where my father grew up. Then as I got a little older, I wasn't always able to come home during Passover. And I spent a Passover in New York City, and I spent a Passover in Jerusalem, and finally, for the first time, I realized those words, L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim, and that Passover Seder was with a bunch of rabbinical students and lasted for 7 hours. I aspire one day, when I don't have kids. But then the next Passover, as a first-year rabbinical student, I participated in this program with HUC, the Hebrew Union College, where they sent first-year students to various communities in the former Soviet Union. And we were told that we were going to lead Passover Seders and help revitalize these communities. That wasn't the whole truth. The truth was that we were arriving with some financial assistance for these communities, and that they were going to teach us. Because when we got there, we were ready to lead a Passover Seder, but they did not need help leading a Passover Seder. They knew how to lead Passover Seders. And so we got to learn how these truly diasporic communities led Passover Seders, these tiny little communities that were still within the boundaries of the former Soviet Union. Myself and a colleague of mine were sent to 2 cities in Russia. The first city was in Krasnodar. And we get there, and I'm a proper first-year rabbinical student. I want to do Passover by the book. I am so excited. And we get there, and it's the first day of Passover, and they say, oh, no, we're not doing Seder till tomorrow. And so with me and my friend and our 2 translators/guides who were in their early 20s, we grabbed some matzah and some, I think, apples and walnuts and some wine, and we went and we sat on the edge of the Black Sea, because Krasnodar is Sochi was where the Olympics were, so that was all anybody was talking about. It was an hour away from there. And so we sat on the Black Sea, and we went through the motions of doing Passover. And while it wasn't what one might label as authentic and put a rubber stamp on it, it was a truly authentic Passover experience of sitting on the edge of the sea and getting to experience the rituals of Passover as perhaps had been done once in a thriving Jewish community before pogroms and before the Tsar and before all of these bad things that happened to the Jews in Russia. And here were people who were trying to revitalize these ancient traditions. And we got to say a phrase that I have said, and then I went back and various places for Passover. Eventually my parents took over the Passover Seder, and then I became a rabbi, and most of the Passovers are now at our house. But the Passover Seder begins with several rituals that we're familiar with, and we eventually get to the Magid section. And I never understood why the Magid, the storytelling section, doesn't actually tell the story of Passover. We don't talk about Moses, we don't talk about the sea, it's all kind of coded language, and it never really made sense to me. Fortunately, a lot of people kind of throw out what's in the Haggadah and tell the story, which I'm a fan of doing. And we can get into why later, but it begins with this beautiful song that some people sing, which in English says, "This is the bread of affliction," and we hold up the matzah. "This is the bread of affliction which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt." And that I can get on board with, but then the next sentence, "Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and share in Passover. And that's held various meaning, both literal, and I didn't understand as a little kid why we didn't do that, but eventually we get to 2024, and I'm sitting preparing for Passover, holding a metaphorical bread of affliction in my head, thinking, how in the world am I going to be able to say this sentence on Passover? I can barely say it right now without feeling a deep sense of emotion. Usually it's read with abundant joy, right? Passover is an incredibly joyful holiday, but this one particular sentence just continues to hit me in the gut every time I think about what it's going to actually mean to sit at our Passover table and repeat that line. When I say that line out loud, to me at least, all I can think about is how many people don't have food at this very moment. I think about the famine unfolding in Gaza. I think about the stories that I heard of people making bread out of dog food. I think about people risking their lives and perhaps getting killed to get a small morsel of food from an aid truck. I think about the aid workers who have been killed. I think about Hamas stealing the food from the Palestinian people. I think about the hostages who are buried beneath Gaza, probably starving themselves if they are actually still alive. So many hungry people on this Passover, so many people who will not get to experience and celebrate the joy we're supposed to feel and a sense of freedom. That line, let all who are hungry come and eat, originates in the Talmud, which was finished around 7 to 8 to 900 CE in Babylonia. And it says, when Rav Huna would eat bread, he would open the doors of his house saying, whoever needs, let him come and eat, which I think would be the most brilliant way to actually do this on Passover if you feel so confident. But then in the very next line, the Talmud invites a rebuttal. Rava then says, I can fulfill all of the customs of Rav Huna, who was the one who ate the bread and flung open his doors. I can fulfill all of those customs except for this one, which I cannot do, due to the fact that there are so many soldiers in the city that I live in that if I let them all eat, they will take all of my food. So all the way back in the Talmud, we're sitting with this struggle of grief and hope that Missy taught us about earlier. What do? Do we open our door and let everybody come and eat? Or do we say, I don't have enough to give everybody, and I need to keep my doors closed? A struggle that's been going on for 1,500 years and that we still struggle with today, even without the war, but felt acutely at this time. Scholars don't know exactly when this line was incorporated into the Haggadah, but we have record of a Rav Matityahu HaGaon, a chief rabbi of that time period of the 9th century CE, so the 800s, saying that when we read that line in the Haggadah, we shouldn't take it literally. So for at least 1,200 years, we've been saying this line on Passover. But he says we shouldn't take this line literally, and that he doesn't take this line literally. Rather, he says that we should provide people with food in advance of Passover so that nobody needs to come begging to us on that very day. And here is where we can take that lesson that Missy taught us and begin to transform some of our grief and despair into hope. Rav Matityahu HaGaon doesn't teach us to pray for God and wait. He teaches us to go and do and act, and not wait until Passover, but to do it before Passover. And on Passover, we sing Avadim Hayinu Ata B'nei Chorin, that we were slaves, and now we are free. We hold that tension throughout the entire Passover service. We learn, and Judaism teaches over and over and over, that we are free people to accept the responsibilities of being free people. That free doesn't mean we just go and do as we please, but rather we now have to take on the sacred obligations. And one of those is to help people who don't have enough to get enough. We're also taught that it is not our job to completely fix every single problem in this world, but that we are not free to desist. We have to engage. And we, sitting here tonight and online, and most of us probably don't have the power to solve what is happening with the hostages or to solve what is happening in Gaza. But that doesn't mean that we are free to just sit by and despair. That there are other people who are also in need of our help. There are people in our own communities, there are people in Chicagoland, in our country, and other parts of the world who could greatly benefit from us providing some sustenance to them. And so this Passover, there's two organizations I want to lift up. You can volunteer with Connections for the Homeless. It's a group of people who come and shop and cook here in our kitchen in Sukkot Shalom every other week and bring food to the Margarita Inn homeless shelter in Evanston, and we are always looking for more volunteers. Giving directly to people and encountering them where they are is an incredibly powerful moment, an incredibly powerful teaching. And there's also an organization called Mazon. Mazon, their tagline is that they are a Jewish response to hunger. And at Mazon, while it's very important to go and help and feed people immediately when they are where they are today, Mazon seeks to change the system. They seek to lobby Congress to expand supplemental nutrition assistance programs, various housing assistance programs, so that ultimately there are fewer people who are in need of food assistance throughout our country and needing to come to houses of worship or other soup kitchens. If we do that today, we know that by the time we get to Passover, when we hold up our matzah, broken or perhaps in crumbs at that point, that when we can say, let all who are hungry come and eat, that we have at least fulfilled part of our obligation to help everybody be able to celebrate a little bit of joy on Passover. We were slaves. Some of us might feel enslaved, but really we are free, and we can celebrate our freedom best by sharing that freedom in whatever way we are able with other people. Shabbat Shalom.
We think on Passover of the narrow place and the bravery that it takes and the trust that it takes to walk through that narrow place. And that is what the text of Gesher Tsar Me'od tells us to do. Gesher Tsar Me'od. Kol ha'olam kulo Gesher Tsar Me'od Gesher Tsar Me'od Gesher Tsar Me'od Kol ha'olam kulo Gesher Tsar Me'od Gesher Tsar Me'od V'ha'ikar Lo lefached klal V'ha'ikar Lo lefached klal Ha'olam kulo Gesher Tsar Me'od Gesher Tsar Me'od Gesher Tsar Me'od Kol ha'olam kulo Gesher Tsar Me'od Gesher Tsar Me'od V'ha'ikar Lo lefached klal V'ha'ikar Lo lefached klal.
It was Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav who taught us that Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od, the entire world is but a narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal, but the most important thing is not to be afraid. My favorite translation, which is how we often translate that song, that poem, my favorite translation comes from Alana Arian, who says, it's not that the most important thing is not to be afraid. We all are afraid, and that's an okay feeling, but rather the most important thing is on the other side of fear. That once we get to the other side of that bridge, we know that we have faced our fears, as difficult as it may be, to somehow get to the other side and continue to cross the many bridges that we have in front of us. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and turn to page 282 at the top for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ועושד ארץ, מושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 287. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
We turn to page 294 as we think about those who are no longer with us, but whose memory we bring in to our own on this Shabbat. We are remembering Bobby Wolf, who died in the last week. We're remembering Ira Stone, who died in the last 30 days. We remember those whose yahrzeit, the yearly anniversary of their death, falls on this Shabbat. Harriet Ruth Hartman, Joseph Wyhop, Michael Kochevar, Barbara Joan Organ, Barbara Peshkin Ruderman, Richard Witcher, Gary Goldberg, Max Sersner, Aline Lappin Stuhlberg, Edward Kohler, Harold Lieberman, Vladimir Lulchud, Alvin Doppelt, Mina Skadron, Susan Pinsoff, Louis Kolpas, Leroy Fadum, Rose Fadum, and Patricia Raisin. Is there anybody else whom you are saying mourner's Kaddish on this Shabbat? Zichronam levracha, may their memories be for an eternal blessing. Page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, b'yama divrach chirote v'amlich malchute, b'chayecho nubiyomecho v'chayedecho beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam omei amaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudusha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
You may be seated.
Just a couple of announcements before we move to Kiddush, Motzi, and Oneg. This Sunday morning, April 21st, at 11 in the morning, our own congregant Barb Mahaney, a prolific and unbelievably talented writer, will be in conversation with Rabbi Tickbrill. So I hope you'll join us at Caffeine for the Brain at 11 a.m. here on Sunday morning. And then 2 Fridays from now, May 3rd, I want to make sure everyone is here in this sanctuary for another choral Shabbat. Even by our choir standards, I have to tell you folks that they are sounding out of this world good. And I'm very excited for the program at services that evening. So do please plan to join us 6:30 p.m. May 3rd here in the sanctuary.
We continue with Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen l'chaim.
Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
This is a special challah, because this is the last challah we're going to have at Shabbat for another 2 weeks. You're going to want to taste this challah. A huge thank you to Missy for sharing some of these stories with us on this really important message of grief and hope on this Shabbat. As we move through Passover, one of the other sentences that we say that can give us some of that hope is we say, Dayenu, which means it would have been enough. It's our word of gratitude, saying, if only this, it would have been enough. If only that, it would have been enough. If only that, it would have been enough. If only that, it would have been enough. So we end with our joy and finding some gratitude in our hearts.
Natan lanu et Shabbat, Natan lanu et Shabbat. Natan lanu et ha-Torah, Natan lanu et ha-Torah. If you want to do the other 9 verses, you can see me in the foyer, but for now we say Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great to see you. Be well.